In tonight's Dateline Defense, the fight against ISIS in Iraq. Today, Iraqi forces faced heavy resistance as they pushed toward the center of Hit, a strategically important town in Western Anbar Province. It sits along an ISIS supply line that links territory controlled by the Sunni extremists in Iraq and Syria. Joining me with the latest is Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer. He's a CIA-trained senior intelligence operations officer, best-selling author, and senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research.
Hey, Morris.
Still talking about ISIS, Tony, and Iraqi troops entered Hit yesterday under cover of heavy airstrikes, but civilians, poor weather, and a political crisis in Baghdad slowed this push. How important is Hit in the overall fight against ISIS, and why are we still talking about this?
Well, it's another location that we have to take back. The good news here, if anything, is that ISIS can no longer move with impunity during the day or, frankly, during the night. That is one thing that's happened to change all that. We'll talk a little bit more of that in a minute about why that's happening. And more importantly, as you mentioned, though, the chaos within the central Baghdad government has been an issue from before ISIS was an issue. The fact that you have essentially a Tehran controlled Shia government is a part of the problem. You cannot have a government of fairness when you have essentially an outside force like Iran and a party such as the Shia kind of controlling all of the different activities. It's not fair, and that's therefore you cannot fight a war against ISIS effectively. We've seen it over and over again. So what you see here is chaos essentially pulling us back. There are things we're trying to do to overcome it, but it's very difficult.
Let me digress for a quick second.
Sure.
Does it bother you and your military buddies and women and then everybody in the military that we make this deal with Iran and they're basically thumbing their nose at us? I mean, they're getting away with a lot of things.
It's worse than that. I mean, they have yet to live up to the intent and letter of the agreement. I think it's totally insane. And more importantly, Morris, we've talked about this almost every interview over the past 2 months.
Yeah.
They're funding the North Koreans on a lot of the research that's necessary to find a way to both complete small aperture nuclear weapons and hydrogen weapons, nuclear bombs, if you will, as well as mating them to missiles, to rockets, which are going to be the delivery capability. So we are, not only in Iraq are we seeing this, we're seeing this on a global scale as well.
Top Pentagon officials say better intel has improved the effectiveness of airstrikes against ISIS. Explain that, Tony.
Two things. First, we recognize that you cannot depend on drones as a simple primary source of intelligence. It just doesn't work. You've got to get people on the ground, looking at buildings, in buildings, being able to move around. And frankly, the human intelligence piece is what we've lacked. That is now coming back. It's going to take a while to get there, but we've seen improvements. So therefore, with better intelligence, you have better accuracy, especially against Morris, leadership targets and economic centers of gravity. Those two things have to be reduced, and we're going after them very readily right now.
Now, last month, General Joseph Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, announced a plan to send more troops into Iraq to support these operations. Officially, the force level is capped at 3,870, but defense officials tell Military Times the real number is more like 5,000. Where is that number headed, and does it matter?
Well, the number is way higher than 5,000. I'll just say that.
Okay.
And yes, it's not accurate. I think there's political reasons for it not being publicly disclosed to the level necessary. Look, I will say this as bluntly as I can. I think if our troops are there, we need to protect our troops, and we should do everything within our power to do it. That means we have to have more than a few troops there to do that. That doesn't mean they're in quote-unquote combat. That means they're there to shape the force, to help the Iraqis build the capacity to be successful. That's their purpose, plus special operations forces. So I'm one of those, Morris, who thinks that, you know, the glass should be more than half full, and we should be doing more. But yes, General Dunford has announced the fact that we're moving forward. Controversially, they've moved Marine Corps artillery units into place. That's a huge issue because that, quote-unquote, may constitute conventional forces. Again, it's how you view it. But the bottom line is it's necessary to have that level of troops, probably even more before it's all done.
The New York Times editorial board blames President Obama for mixed messages about troop levels. What role does politics play in this discussion, Tony?
Far more than it should. This is one of those issues that should remain completely apolitical. It should be based on what the objectives are assigned to the Pentagon. Those objectives then stated as requirements, and those requirements turned into operational concepts and operational orders. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that these days. The White House attempts to basically run this war by looking through a soda straw, and they do it in such a way to constrain those officials who are having to fight the war from doing what's necessary. And that's why you see this incremental, you got to do this, you got to do that. So it's really bad. This is the worst I've ever seen it. This goes back to LBJ, to Lyndon Baines Johnson, President Johnson in the 60s.
Micromanaging Vietnam.
Micromanaging Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so that's why we've seen the bad results last year. The White House is getting a little bit better about it. Let's hope they continue to give the Pentagon more latitude.
All right, before you go, give us the view from 40,000 feet. What needs to happen for ISIS to lose control of Raqqa in northern Syria and Mosul in northern Iraq?
Three things. First, we need to continue to build capacity with our partners. We don't want boots on the ground. I'm fairly confident now that we will see the defeat of ISIS in Iraq quickly. With that said, we're not going to see any solution for Syria. That's completely an unknown quantity. I don't want to get into that today. It would take too long. Secondly, we have to accept that ISIS has metastasized. It's now a global threat. It's everywhere.
Right.
We don't want it to be. Accepting that and then putting together an operations plan, probably using Special Operations Command, is the best thing we could do. Third, we need to look at the root of why ISIS exists at all, the radical Islamist issue, and try to start dealing with that. And that's a political, diplomatic issue that we have to take separately from the military issues, but they all have to be addressed simultaneously.
Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer, Senior Fellow at the London Center for Policy Research. Thanks, Tony.
Sure, thank you.